But that game at the London Stadium, Darren, at the weekend, first of all, Arsenal were every bit as good as Mikel Arteta said, but we have to talk about West Ham as well. They got 2 goals back from unlikely sources. Both their fullbacks scored. But when you're 4 down at home in the first half, I mean, the Moose used the word there. I know he's got skin in the game. West Ham. That was embarrassing for West Ham.
Yeah, I don't think that was hyperbole from the Moose because it wasn't just the number of goals. It was the regularity that they were scored with. It was the passive nature of West Ham's resistance. It was the players not smelling danger. There was so much in terms of red flags about West Ham. Another West Ham performance. Now, I've been on the show for quite some time, ever since Lopetegui went there, and I said before, I've never felt that he is a good fit for the club. There's nothing about his body of work that says to me that he's a West Ham manager. And I think the performances are showing that. I get and I understand and I take into consideration the feelings of West Ham fans that they felt, and you could argue David Moyes felt that they'd reached the end of the road with him. But I just look at the other fits that there could have been that would have been more appropriate for West Ham than
What do you mean by
Lopetegui.
appropriate, Darren? When you say you don't think it's the right fit for West Ham, you're not suggesting he's not a good coach or anything. I get that because he has done well at various places, including Seville. What made you feel that he wouldn't be the right kind of manager for them?
Well, I think Seville is not a club comparable to West Ham. Seville have had great success in the what was the old UEFA Cup and the Europa League. They've been very consistent in that competition. They've been able to balance it with being consistent in the Spanish league as well. I think he was with the Spanish under-21 side. He had a brief spell at Real Madrid, and he was with the Spanish national side too.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at that body of work, how do you go from all of that to West Ham? And to me, I just felt that it needed somebody for where West Ham are, given that David Moyes had won their first European trophy in something like 4 decades. It needed someone who was going to continue that work with an understanding of what West Ham are about, build on that kind of solid defensive base that had enabled him to win that trophy, and just be able to establish a really clear identity about the team very early on. And I've never quite seen at any stage what he's trying to do with that side, even though he spent a lot of money in the summer.
I mean, Danny, there's always a bit like Spurs, West Ham. There's always a demand from the fans they play a certain way, but equally you've got to try and get results in the most difficult league in the world.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing when you take on a manager who jumped ship at Wolves because he wasn't getting what he wanted and didn't feel like he had the squad to compete, and then Gary Neal goes in and makes them competitive, that kind of makes me think, type of guy have we got here? It's and if you look at it from a football perspective, I'm watching West Ham since he's come in, and they're so in between. They're not sit off, drop deep, pragmatic, Moisey type, and they're not high press. They're kind of a little bit somewhere in the middle, which is just so easy to. It looks so easy to play against. They're struggling for athleticism in the middle of the pitch. The midfield boys. They're conceding lots of chances. And the biggest concern watching West Ham, so if you look at, if you're talking about home games, because obviously away from home is really difficult, but the Chelsea game, which was alarmingly bad, and then to replicate that against Arsenal, because you're always going to get found out more by high-quality teams that you play against. They've not progressed. They've not looked like, oh, okay, now I get it. I can see what they're trying to do. I see that they've got some good attacking players and get them out of trouble now and again with Kudus or with Bowen. Really like Bowen, and Paqueta's a top quality player. But defensively, naive, so spaced out. There's not really a definitive plan from a defensive structure. I don't see that. It's not looking. I agree with you. I don't think it's looking particularly favourable for him moving forward.
No.
The final thing I forgot to say, which is probably the most important, is that body language of players when you're playing for a new manager and trying to get on, be on board with them, it doesn't feel like they're with it. I'm watching them at the weekend, and I did the game. Some of the basics. and I mean simple fundamentals of football, were not there. And I don't think players deliberately don't do it. They're just so disillusioned on what they're trying to do that they get caught out all the time.
I could just give you a bit of context as well. I remember when they allowed David Moyes to leave the last time and they brought in Pellegrini, and the players were so disillusioned under him. He brought in a goalkeeper that it wouldn't be hyperbole to say he couldn't catch. I remember being at a game at Oxford and I think they were beaten 4-0 and the goalkeeper's performance was awful. I know for a fact that the players were unhappy and they made, one or two of them made representations behind the scenes, and it smells of that kind of, okay, clearly Lopetegui isn't that bad, but I just think that level of disillusionment with the players, because I've covered Spurs I've covered West Ham. I'm looking at you, Dan, thinking of Spurs. I've covered West Ham for a long time. There are good players in that squad.
Do you know what they need? Do you know what they needed, Dan? They needed to go completely the other way of Moyes. If they were going to get rid of Moyes, you go completely the other way. You go Ange, you go Hertzler, you go. I don't mean them, but that
to
a
pressing and dynamic player
who might just take the risk. Take the risk.
If you look at their 3 wins so far, Newcastle are in a poor run of form at the moment.
And missed some big chances.
And they missed some. And then you're looking at Manchester United. Again, they were knee-deep in a poor run of form before Amorim came in. Even before that, when Van Nistelrooy steadied the ship a little bit. And then Ipswich, who are around about the bottom of the league. They're the wins that they've had so far. But against any team that is organised and has a plan, and certainly against the top teams, West Ham are cut wide open. And the fans are very apprehensive now about the future going forward.
Yeah, it's wasting people like Bowen and Paquetá to if you're not going to get the ball forward in some kind of measured way to them. Meanwhile, Arsenal, Odegaard back, Saka back past his injury, and just absolutely purring again. Now, whether Liverpool have just got off to such a flyer. And it's not like a Grand Prix. There are no yellow flags to slow them down. But I actually think Chelsea are a really good team as well and improving week by week. But if anyone's going to hunt them down, Darren, I suppose it has to be Arsenal we have to rely on.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal might well be kicking themselves because obviously the feeling had been that this would be their season. And at the start of the season, I felt that it would be. And they could never have seen that Liverpool would have the season that they're having at the moment. But Arsenal could have had such a gift this time around with the recruitment and the offensive power that they've got. But as we were saying, Odegaard has been such a huge miss for them. And they'll look back with regret at this period where they've dropped points that they should have been able to take. And I think... yes, they're back in business again, and yes, if they're going to do it, if someone's going to reel in Liverpool, it's going to be Arsenal.
My simplistic overview of Arsenal is that they will come and fight for it because they're a hell of a good side, and the reality is they look great defensively, and also they've only, I think I'm right with this, Dan, but they've only lost 1 game with 11.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yes, you could argue ill-discipline. Yes, you could argue they made their own problems. But realistically...
stuff happens in a game,
Stuff happens, and very rarely does a team after 12 games have 3 games where they've played with 10.
The only thing, Dan, Liverpool have got the best defensive record in the Premier League, right? It's 11 wins in the Premier League from 13, 18 from 20. There doesn't seem to be any sign of them stopping, bar injury. Yeah, and obviously, Alisson is yet to come back. Konate is yet to come back as well. So they do have those, and Jota's going to come back as well. They do have those options.
They do, but let's if you're looking from an Arsenal perspective, you've got to think, well, Liverpool have got to have the odd 1 or 2 bad games. Every team does. And Liverpool might have 1 or 2 where they get a stupid sending off, and Arsenal never thought it was going to happen to them. It could happen. I think the point being is that if anyone's capable at the moment of going on a run of 8, 9, 10 wins, Arsenal are the only other team you can see doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're pretty good, and I've got to be neutral about it. They are a very, very good football team. And the thing about Odegaard is that he makes them better in every way and gives them a variety of ways of winning the game. That they don't have without him. They've got to rely on one or two things happening.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.